On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, we're speaking with a fellow camp owner who didn't run camp this summer about making that difficult decision, the process, vulnerability, bittersweet moments, and what a summer without camp looked like. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. I'm Kelly Shuna, co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. I'm Howie Grossinger, and I'm the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in Toronto, in Canada, and also a partner of Camp Walden, an overnight camp about 3 hours north of Toronto. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/COP or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. We are very grateful for the sponsorship we have for our podcast. Kelly and I are really grateful to Camp Brain, and it's our pleasure to tell you a little more about Camp Brain, our sponsors of the Camp Owners Podcast. Camp Brain is camp management software which serves over 1,300 camps. They've been doing this since 1994 with 45 plus dedicated staff to meet your every need. They have a large support team which is dedicated to answering emails and phone calls. All questions and inquiries are replied to within 2 hours. In fact, their response time as a vendor is just incredible. I have mentioned in other previous shows that I'm a proud Camp Brain user since 1994. Our camp has been with them for a very long time. And just about now, at the time of the airing of this podcast, they do their annual Camp Brain Brainstorm Conference, which is an opportunity for Camp Brain users to get together. And this year, given the times, it's done virtually. So lots of Camp Brain users are given the opportunity to connect with the amazing Camp Brain team to have their questions answered and share their experiences with other Camp Brain users. So I encourage everyone, if you're looking for new camp management software, check out our sponsor, Camp Brain, at campbrain.com or call them at 866-485-8885.
So here we are at episode 2 of season 2, Howie, and we thought that our conversation today would be surrounding camps that didn't run in 2020. So our first episode, we talked to camps that did run and heard from their experience and wisdom and things to share and looking ahead to 2021. But today we're going to talk with a camp that did not run and hear a little bit about what that was like for them and what they're looking for in their 2021 season.
Absolutely, and we're so thrilled to have Shari Sigoloff, the co-owner and director of Camp Thunderbird in Bemidji, Minnesota. Welcome, Shari.
Hi, it's so great to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, a pleasure. Really, really looking forward to our chat today. As part of every episode, we really know that our listeners benefit from hearing sort of the origin story of all of our guests, and they're also interesting and fascinating. And I thought before Kelly and I and yourself get into the discussion of our topic, perhaps you could just share a little bit about your background in camping, how it all came to be. We're all very interested in learning more.
Sure. So I'm a third generation camp director, and I'm a true camp baby, I like to say. I was born on June 24th, and I'm not going to disclose the year, but I'm not that old. And literally my grandfather told my mother, my grandfather was our boys camp owner at that time, and my mom and dad worked for my grandparents. And my grandfather said to my mother, "You go have that baby today and get induced, because tomorrow is opening day and your husband has to be at work." And so I was literally born the day before the camp season opened. I grew up as a camper at Thunderbird. I did attend another camp just as part of like having another camp experience. And I always loved camp. It really, for me, was a salvation. a place to just be myself. But I wasn't sure I wanted to run camp. And so I actually went out, got a job, did a degree and got a job as a speech language pathologist. And I worked in the school, still connected to kids. And met my then husband, who was a school teacher, and worked in the schools for a couple of years. And in 1999 was poised to get married to my now husband, Michael. And I turned to him one day and I said, you know what? I spent 5 years or 4 years like balancing between being a speech pathologist and working 25 plus hours a week for my parents after my school day had finished. And being an SLP is fun, but it's not exciting. It's not busy enough for me. And I think I'm leaving and I'm going to become a camp director. And he said, but we've planned all these great fun summers. What do you mean? And I said, sorry. And I joined my parents in 99. And then Michael and I actually purchased our camps from my parents in 2008. We co-direct our boys camp, and we have a director of our boys camp who I always say is kind of like the brother. I have sisters, and he's the brother that I never really wanted, but managed to pick up when he took over boys camp. He came across as a international staff member from England and kind of worked his way up through the ranks, met his wife, left camp and came back, and we started directing each of our camps in '08. So that's kind of my story.
That's cool. You know, what's interesting is my degree is in speech language pathology, my graduate or my undergrad. And then the woman who started our camp, she was also a speech therapist. So that's interesting that that's a field that maybe is a starter for some camp people.
I think it really helped. It's really helped to inform me in working with our kids and our staff actually as well. But that is
my daughter's an SLP.
Oh, no way.
That's crazy.
I love that.
I love the connection.
And I was born on June 25th, so June.
Well,
yes, for
that's when I was supposed to be born, Howie. So
it's supposed to be done. I like that, right? Like baby's done.
Kindred spirits, for sure. Kindred spirits, all of us.
I like that. Well, I really like as well that we had Andy Lilienthal was one of our guests for episode 1. And his camp did run, and he talked about being a camp baby. Like he was basically born at camp. So this is really interesting for us to have a guest on each side of that. There are long-term camp families and long-term camp babies born into camp, as you'd call it. So Shari, we really appreciate you being on and being able to tell us about what your summer looked like. So I think that's where we like to start is just, can you talk with us a little bit about the spring, right? So what was the spring like for you and Michael? How did you make the choice not to run, and kind of what brought you then to your summer?
Sure. So we spent, much like probably most camp directors, in tons of Zoom meetings, connecting with different groups of camp directors, talking about COVID, creating protocols, really supporting, commiserating with one another. I think I probably did at least 3 Zoom calls a week with various groups in the camping industry. And we felt really good. Ready to kind of pull the trigger and run. We were nervous, but felt very much like Andy. I listened to his podcast with you all, like, we can do this. We went through H1N1. We're all good. Like, we've had pandemics. And so we were really moving forward, and around May 17th, we sort of looked at each other and said, we're supposed to be on the ground at camp in a matter of weeks. And the Minnesota Department of Health had not really informed us of what was really going to be the guidelines that we needed to follow. So we made the decision to, did the numbers, and we made the decision to actually push camp start date back. And we informed all of our camp families. We were actually really fortunate space-wise. We could accommodate all of our first and second and full season kids at the same time. And so we decided that we were just going to have one start date. Our half season kids were going to leave midway through. We were going to shorten our session. We were going to have about a 5.5-week session. And we sent out that letter, and our parents said, oh, thank you. We support you. We're really excited. We had some parents, I think, who also said, really, are you really going to do this? And we said, we're still really believing that this is going to be something that we can do for ourselves, our staff, and our campers. Then we started making the phone calls to our certification course holders, and they said, sorry, we're not going to be able to offer wilderness first responder to you and wilderness first aid. We're dropping all of our courses. And then our lifeguard staff said, we can't do this. Like, we cannot come in and teach your staff. And that was the turning point for us in some regards. We still hadn't heard from Minnesota Department of Health, but we looked at each other and said, okay, we have a lot of returning staff, but we really count on all of those certifications to keep everybody safe in camp. So we went from like, okay, we've got this, to, this is now starting to feel even a little bit more worrisome from a safety standpoint, COVID aside. And that was also, I think, the point in which it really felt like Minnesota Department of Health was not going to come out with the information that we needed in a timely manner. So in those kind of, in a couple of short days, we really sat down with each other and had a lot of conversations with our boys camp director, and we decided we just didn't have the information we needed, and we didn't feel like we could be a safe experience from all of those certifications as well. And Minnesota Department of Health, even on the day that we were like poised to put out the letter and put out our videotape, still was saying, oh, maybe we'll get back to you guys by next week. And it just felt like that was the moment. So we pulled the trigger on May 21st. And it was probably ranking up there with one of the hardest decisions that we've ever had to make. And I think in some respects, it also felt a little liberating, like it was bittersweet, maybe, for us. But that's what we kind of decided. And from there, kind of continued.
Isn't it amazing, Kelly, hearing Shari, describe that process. Kelly and I have had the opportunity over several months to, consistently check in with each other. And it's amazing how all of our stories about deciding not to operate follow a similar pattern, about this ongoing wait time for the authorities to give us some direction, and how that ended up jutting up against what we normally know are the markers for getting our facilities ready and getting everyone trained and getting one in. And as the calendar started shrinking, we all went through a process of, wondering how we could all sort of make it work within those tight timelines. My overnight camp was not allowed to operate by the government, but day camps were in our province. So, ultimately, we just really had to look at what those guidelines were. But similar to you, safe and healthy, and the realities of what your particular operation delivers. We talk so much about kudos to those amazing camps that were able to run and made the decision. But at the end of the day, we all wanted to run, but when we looked very introspectively to our own operation, the people we work with, a lot of us came to the decision that there wasn't a way forward with all various things. In your case, it very much had to do with, a component of it was certifications, et cetera. In my case, I have 700 campers, virtually a day being bused to my 53-acre facility sort of just outside Toronto, and we weren't allowed to use buses. And and 80% of my camper population utilizes busing, and how would we do it safely? And I'm an outdoor camp. So a lot of those things went into how could we deliver this safely. And it just, my wife and I, who as well, similar to you, Shari is a camp baby because she grew up with her parents running our camp. Just to fathom not running was, professionally and personally, really the hardest decision that, you can imagine making. So, it's in some ways it's gratifying to hear how your journey took you, but the more people I talk to, there are such similar elements to all of it. It's quite amazing, isn't it, Kelly?
Oh my gosh, a million elements that go into it. And I imagine for the two of you, having the generation prior to you to either have discussions with, to get their feedback, whether they were supportive or not supportive, adds a whole another level to it. I have the camp owners previous to us that we bought it from, which we still are, indebted to. So that weighed into it for us too of, oh, well, we need to pay these people. And what if we don't have camp? And we don't feel like it's the right thing to do for our camp and our community and the kids, but we're legally bound to this. So that, is a whole different level, but it would be interesting on your perspectives or on your sides to have that other generation to, yeah. I mean, Shari, are your parents still involved with camp at all?
So my mother is still alive. My father actually passed away shortly after we transitioned. He found out on the last day of our camp season in '08 that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oh,
So
wow.
he always said he had one day of rest before, he transitioned.
Sorry to hear
camp.
that.
Yeah. But my mom is here. She's not involved in camp at all, but she had a lot of opinions. Uh, as parents sometimes do.
Yep.
And she was really nervous about us opening camp. I think she was relieved when we made the decision not to open camp. And partly because she wasn't looking and following as closely, but also she was concerned, and rightly so, with how people would perceive our decision, the mixed reviews. And that's something I know probably all of us had that moment of like, what, you're not opening? Or, oh, I'm so glad I didn't have to make the decision not to send my kid. So
Yeah. I think it was just an
I think
impossible
it's
decision.
Yeah, for sure. And, to Shari's discussion about the role that her mom played in terms of just being a sounding board in our situation, we have, both of Shari's parents are still actually fixtures at our day camp. My mother-in-law runs a great activity. She's essentially grandma of camp, and the little ones love her. And my father-in-law, who's a guru of day camp transportation, is still on the scene. And I think they just truly just felt for us emotionally. They were just felt, in their 60 years of running camp, with all the great stories and hardships that they even went through. They were the first to say, this is nothing we could, have ever dealt with what you're dealing with. And their support was, really, really valuable as very much a sounding board. But, we bought camp from them about 10, 12 years ago. And, we've kept their presence at camp very much, as part of the family experience here at our camp, which many camps do. But, an extension of that for us, Shari and Kelly, was I have adult children. And for those of us who are camp owners who have, kids who at the very least, experience camp, with us and alongside us, which is a double-edged sword in many ways. And there's too many stories we can talk as camp owners, which very much could be another episode, Kelly, to talk about growing up with your parents owning the camp.
right.
But I think it was an opportunity. Kelly and I have spoken lots, off the show about, our kids got to see us in a way that they probably have never seen us. Right. And as camp owners and business owners, for us, I kept on reflecting, in some ways, how grateful Shari and I were that our kids were, in their 20s and, were able to right alongside us, not that all of their desire is to be in the camping business, but just to be able to be very transparent about the business implications and, what this meant for us. And it was very, we'll talk more as the episode goes on about some things, we pivoted to. But, I can't help but think for those of us who own camp, who have children who are at least thinking about camp or live it alongside us, there were those months before decision making where, they saw you, they know the craziness of camp as it is because they grow up with you, but this was at a level that none of us had ever experienced. So Kelly, I know you talked about your kids seeing mom and dad deal with this, and Shari, I thought maybe we would just talk for a few minutes as decision making went along. Can we talk a little bit about, family and decision making in our households? It was, I reflect on it being very grateful that we brought them into the loop and they were there. But boy, it was something you hope your kids never have to see you go through.
Yeah. What was it like for you, Shari?
Painful at times. It's interesting how our son aspires maybe to take over camp. And we very much like what our parents did with my sisters and I. We say, go off, like finish your degree. He's only a freshman in college. Finish your degree, be well-rounded. Think about this. It's a big decision. And I think that being part of, I wouldn't so much say the conversations, but hearing the conversations, hearing the Zoom calls, understanding the depth of what we were potentially about to experience, I don't want to say turned him off, but I think it was really eye-opening for him. And it was also a really interesting time of trust building in our house. We had to have very difficult conversations about the finances of our life. Kelly, like you, we still are paying my mom as part of taking care of finishing off the payments of camp. And so I think it was really eye-opening. I think it's been a really informative and important process for our kids then, and even through the summer months. So I like to say there are experiences as part of COVID that I wouldn't trade out. And that's one of them. Their ability to watch, their very stoic father feel, see him feel and look emotional in a way that he had never done before. And me openly crying on a regular basis because this was just really tough stuff that nobody had ever had to deal with in generations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
totally
I
could identify with
crying.
that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and for me, my kids are campers. And so that added for me another level to it because I was seeing probably what my campers were feeling at their homes. My kids would look at us and be like, "Are we going to have camp this summer, Mom and Dad?" And we would just be like, I don't know. I don't know. And like you talked about, Shari and Howie, very vulnerable. And there was lots of times where my kids would be like, "Mom, are you crying?" I'm like, yes, I am. I'm really, and so it really was a balance of like being really open with them and transparent. And, my kids are 9 at the time, they were 9, 11, and 13. And so it was being transparent and open with them and saying, I don't know. But also, it's already hard, I think, to have sometimes a boundary between camp and your family, especially when you're living up there. And for us, our day camp's right outside. And so it can be hard, if you want to talk about something, sometimes you talk in code a little bit, and then sometimes you just have to go on a walk
Right.
And not say a staff member's name. But yeah, it was really vulnerable. It was really raw. But I think it also, for them, gave them an even deeper understanding, like you talked about, Shari, about how much camp means to us as a family, and it's blood, sweat, and tears and emotions and all of it. And yeah, there's things I wouldn't trade either. And there's things that I hope to never go through again.
Correct.
For sure. And we live this experience, being camp owners and living this 365. There isn't a day that goes by where we're not, talking of some aspect of what we do and our passion for it. And so, we'll all look back at this and our kids will remember, how we handled it. And I think that, I still think that for all of us who live this with our kids, seeing us go through this as camp owners, I think these will be indelible moments in their memories of how their parents handled things. And I think it, in many ways, probably strengthens so much of how they feel about the work you do and how you do it. And I think, I think that those are all good lessons for our kids, regardless of the age. I think that they all pick up on, who we are as people in these moments for sure. I wanted to ask, as we got through the decision-making process, Shari, can you talk a little bit about the ultimate communication to, your families and your staff about the decision you made, the method in which you chose to do it? There's so many things we could be talking about just in decision-making, but,
Right.
Once that difficult decision was made and the emotion and all the stuff we went through, I believe you said May 21st. What did that day look like in terms of communication? How did you execute that communication, et cetera?
Sure. So we had been keeping notes on formulating a letter over probably a couple of weeks, just in case, and just because we didn't want to have to sit down and punch out something really quickly. We really wanted, and I think we used that as part of our decision-making process also to inform kind of how we were feeling. Ultimately, the credit goes to Michael. He sat down and wrote a letter. We started with a letter, and we felt like we needed to put it in on paper, and that we wanted to have something that we could send out to all of our camp community, alumni, camp parents, staff, and that we would send it all at the same moment. And we ultimately also decided to videotape ourselves. Michael and I did our own video, and then our boys camp director, Roger, videotaped himself as well. And that was, again, one of the hardest things, that, you know, to sit down and quickly put into words without tears streaming down our faces, to say, you know, we know this is this is terrible news for you as campers in particular, the disappointment that our kids would feel and the lack of their ability to come home to what they truly say is their second home. And I think we had our son standing there with the iPhone, and I think we probably did 5 or 6 takes, maybe. We thought we would edit it together, and finally in the end, we just sat down, we wiped our tears, we took deep breaths. And I remember people after we put out that video saying, "How did you do that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's, you know, so hard." Not easy, I promise. So.
5 or 6 takes. That's pretty darn good. I will say.
Pretty darn.
It's funny now, but at the moment I remember videoing that and I was the same way, like, "Kelly, keep it together." And then a couple takes, I was like, "Peter, you look too happy." He'd be like, "Hey, campers." I'm like, no,
Right.
no, you can't be that, like, and he wasn't happy, but it was so hard to be like, you want to be like, "Hey, campers," you know, but I was like, no, Shuna, less smiling, more serious. So I swear it was like 20. So I'm impressed that you did in 5 or 6, because it was a lot.
I remember digging
sure.
digging my fingernails into my hand to keep from crying, Kelly. So sorry, Howie.
Mm-hmm.
No, perfect. I know. I'm glad. You know, Sari and I did a video, and our daughter, you know, similarly videotaped it, and you know, getting through that, and you know, having Jordana, our daughter, you know, videotaping it, and there were moments, though, similar to you, Kelly, where, you know, Dad, I think you smiled too much in that, or that, like, I think we went through some moments of deep, you know, obviously it was the most emotional thing, but, you know, we maybe overcompensated for, you know, trying not to be sad, that we you know, my daughter ended up saying it may, you know, I think it went a little too far on that one. And it, you know, but at the end of the day, I know for all of us, we struck the right tone and chord, and probably the most difficult message I know we've ever had to send. And I can only imagine, you know, I know only from my own experience about, you know, the feedback we got, you know, because you know, as camp people, you know, we do wear typically our emotions on our sleeve, and we're heartfelt, and that's ultimately why our families continue to be with us and trust us. And it was a real moment for that. But that video on the day that, you know, I'm sure we respectively each had to do it, was so difficult. And I even think back, like, how did we get through that? Like, I'm surprised it didn't take twice as long as it actually did. So very interesting. And I had an opportunity, and I know, you know, a big shout out to summer camp professionals and our Slack channel through Go Camp Pro, et cetera. You know, there were lots of people doing some awesome sharing about communication, and you know, we all, you know, all across North America were formulating, getting ideas. You know, you mentioned, Shari, how Michael was writing notes and how many drafts. And have you ever wordsmithed communication more in your life than those, you know, 6 to 8 weeks in the spring when you just wanted to get every word right? And yeah, it was quite something. So kudos to you, to all of us for getting through that, for sure.
Right.
I remember when I was on that Slack COVID page that Travis made with Go Camp Pro, the first video that was posted on there about a camp closing, I will never forget that moment, because for me, it got really real that camp might not happen. I think before that I was like, oh, it's going to happen. We got this. And then I saw that and I thought, oh my gosh. Like I could just
Yeah.
picture myself in that moment recording it. And so the video, yeah, that wasn't easy for any camp to have to do that. So Shari, how did you then spend your summer? So once you let your families know that camp wasn't happening, did you pivot to something else? Did you work on camp for the summer? What did your summer look like for you?
Sure. So we thought about pivoting to something else. We kind of ran the numbers on it. We thought about going back to Minnesota Department of Health, still in those like following days. We still didn't know if camp we were going to be able to operate even as any type of summer experience. And the weight of that just felt too heavy. And it just didn't seem right to string our families along and say like, oh, well, as soon as we hear from the Minnesota Department of Health, we might be able to open. We felt like it was really important to let everyone, our staff included, almost more importantly, because we had said we might run some kind of family experience and we might need some staff. And they were really wanting to stick around, but also knowing that they needed to figure out their summer plans. And I'm happy to say, like, we actually sent a bunch of our staff elsewhere to work because ultimately we just said, we can't do anything. We just need to close and move on. And I remember the night that we said, we had said we hadn't really shared too much with our families that we might open as a family camp. We kind of had just said, if something else can occur, we'll let you know. So the night that we made the decision to not have any kind of family camp experience, we were having dinner with our kids. And I said, all right, oh my gosh, this is so weird. Here's the COVID bright spot. We have the whole summer where we could rent an RV and we could travel and, we could have so much fun as a family, something that we've never been able to do. And literally in unison, our kids looked at us and said, we have spent enough time with you this spring. We love you. I'm not even sure they said that. Maybe I envisioned they said that. But they were like, no, we're not doing that. So that kind of, then we had to regroup and sort of think about what we wanted to do. And we spent some time up at camp. It's kind of we had a crazy summer, but my husband and our son Dana went up to camp for about a week, came back to go through a social distancing graduation, and we had a COVID in the community, a COVID exposure. So we got our kids tested, and our daughter Paige actually tested positive. So that was really scary, honestly. She was fine. She had some mild symptoms. We got through that, and then we all, in different times, trekked back up to camp. I drove up with my son. He went to boys camp and met a couple of his camp friends who had come in from different areas, and they hung out at boys camp. And I was at girls camp by myself for a handful of days. And it was really hard. It felt super lonely. Camp it was eerie. You could hear sort of silence in a way that we had never experienced before. At the end of the camp season, it always feels quiet. This felt lonely. But then I had a group of friends who showed up, camp friends who were supposed to work. And we spent 3 weeks working a little bit. Like, we'd go through the camp medication and like look for expiration dates and get rid of all the food that was going to expire and take it to the food shelter. And then we would spend the afternoons at our beach, our boys camp beach, every day for like 4 hours. And I've never done that in my life. My husband, Michael, came up at one point, took our daughter off to a lacrosse tournament, and was supposed to come back. And then our son tore his ACL, and our life got even more chaotic after that. So he was back in St. Louis. But it was just kind of nice. I mean, there was a lot of extra stuff that came out of that, but that was like sort of how we spent as a family our summer, sort of a mix of here in St. Louis and up in Bemidji.
Amazing. And Kelly, I know that, when you made the decision, as a day camp operator, and I know the feelings you were having about, letting down your community, and, someone else in the community was running, and, you talk maybe a little bit about your own experience about, pivoting or some other things that you decided to maybe do or try to do to stay connected to your community.
Yeah. So when we were really close to that decision, I think we knew in our gut what was the right thing. You know, Shari, like you waiting for information from the health department, and even for day camps, it wasn't coming. And all of a sudden they were like, okay, you can run. Cause I think there was a lot of legislative pressure to get schools the okay to run. So they threw summer camp, day camps into that, without really much differentiation from school to outdoor day camp. But, you know, once we decided not to run, what we did decide to do was take out the PPP loan and hire on our long-term staff that wanted a position here at camp. You know, they had hung with us, and, you know, I'm sure just like all of you, I was picturing the 800 kids that I had let down. I was picturing those parents and the staff. It just was all so much on your shoulders, but deciding to do that loan felt like the one thing that we could do and take care of our staff and who feel like family members to us. So we hired on 25 staff members, all of our 2-year plus, that wanted a position here for the summer. And they did little work pods around camp. And similar to what I hear you saying, Shari, was that, okay, what can we do with this summer? Or what are going to be those bright spots of hopefully this never happens again, but what can we take away from the summer? And, you know, we all dedicate all summer to camp. So how can we change that, or how can we spend that time? And so we did the 8 weeks of our staff here. And then our family, you know, we took a road trip out to see my dad in Montana and camped so that we weren't staying at hotels, and we didn't have an end date. We just said, okay, well, when we decide to go home, we'll go home, and did camping and horseback riding, and just really all summer tried to say, we'll never have a summer like this again. So what are the things that we can do and to make lemonade out of lemons and, you know, silver lining. I don't think Brene Brown likes the silver lining, but we tried to make, you know, some positive things out of it, and just really tried to make the best out of the situation.
For us, it was, you know, and I know we all agree, you know, one thing to tell your families, but, you know, when we shared it with our key staff and we shared it with all of our staff, and, you know, even envisioning a summer not with the people you've spent so many summers with, you know, there was that period of time that once the decision was made where we all had to sort of come to grips with, well, this really means we're not going to be together. And I think we all had a period of having to come to that reality. But once we did, you know, for us, you know, we're a camp that was scheduled to celebrate its 75th season in 2020. You know, we're Canada's oldest private-owned day camp, and so we had a lot of things planned, and we just felt there was a real opportunity for us to remain connected. And while everyone was virtually zoomed out, and I use those two terms, you know, purposefully, we didn't want to go to a full out sign up, people pay money for virtual camp. That was not our wheelhouse. That's not we envisioned camp being. It really did give us an opportunity to look at ways that we could remain engaged with our community. We got a lot of good feedback from families. One of our traditions at our day camp is every camper gets a backpack, and it's sort of a tradition, and we give it to everybody. And we decided that since the backpacks were ordered and they were delivered, that we were going to still give out the backpacks. And so we designed, and I guess this is a really good time to mention that, you know, my daughter Jordana, who is the SLP, you know, has a vision, hopefully, to be in the camping business one day. It was a really great opportunity for her to take on leadership that she was really eager to take. So she designed, with the help of a good number of staff who were eager to help in any way, we called it a Packed by CRH, Camp Robin Hood program in July, where we scheduled opportunities for families to come pick up their backpack. We put activities or materials in the backpack. We had actually a drive-through experience on our facility. We have 53 acres. So just like the municipal zoo had a drive-through experience to see the animals, we designed a drive-through experience at our camp where it was like 10 minutes on the property, you stay in your car, and you stopped at stations where we would do activities and sing with the kids, and they would see familiar faces, and it would end with Sari and I personally giving out backpacks with the material in it, and we gave out about, about 75% of our registered families actually collected their backpacks. And with that backpack became the opportunity to participate in a 4-week July online experience where lots of our staff prepared videos, activities, singing songs, and we did some live events. And it was just something we felt kept camp, in our bloodstream in a very real way, but also allowed families and parents to, especially for young kids that we serve at day camp, a chance for parents to have their kids do some stuff and see some familiar faces. So for us, that was a really successful and gratifying experience. And as parents of kids who may want to come in the business, it was a great opportunity for Jordana to spread her wings and continue to establish her place in our organization. And it was really, really a very proud moment, but also just super beneficial to have these people with so much energy to deliver this. So that was a real highlight for us. I also needed to open up my pools. We think about how our facilities need to get through the season, and we all have wear and tear, as we know, on many of the facilities that we use. I had to open up our swimming pools. And so what I was able to do, because there was no revenue, is actually we generated revenue. I rented out 8 hours a day to 3 local swim clubs because competitive swimmers couldn't use indoor pools. 2 of our larger indoor pools were used for swim training. So I was able to get a little bit of revenue. I was able to basically pay for the cost of the upkeep of the pool. And it actually created an opportunity to hire some staff to do some projects that allow camp to actually look a little different and maybe a little more updated in certain areas because we were able to generate some revenue. So those are just a couple things that we did that allowed us to, stay, connected to camp. Just like you, Shari, I'm lucky that I also operate an overnight camp. We did spend some good quality time up at camp too, and at the beach at our camp and things like that. But those are just some ways we pivoted to some other things that stayed connected with families.
Sure. I wonder how if you would have seen that in your daughter as early as you did, or if COVID wouldn't have happened and you wouldn't have closed camp, if you would have had that opportunity to see your daughter in that different light, in that different way, and for her to be able to step up. I think that's kind of cool. That who knows if that would have happened or when per se, but it sounded like it happened really authentically and kind of she was motivated versus saying, okay, honey, if you want to come try this, why don't you step in? It sounds like it was just really authentic how that happened. That's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
And I think to the people that she works closely with, and Shari, maybe you can speak to this from your own experiences, ultimately maybe having a vision. I know this was with my wife, it's a very fine line for our kids to, be super assertive because people think certain things are just handed to you or it's just going to naturally happen. So this was actually, an opportunity, as you said, I think for her to authentically weave her into a real need. And I think the people who are her age, who work at camp, and many who are older, because we have an older leadership team, just naturally saw this as a really great opportunity for her and just supported her in every way. So just, out of a very bad situation, that was very much a highlight. And we did do our own version of family camp in August. Following the guidelines locally, we had up to 70 people on our site having a day of camp as their own social bubble. So she was also able to, do that, and Sari and I, could help her and support her and meet with the parents. So that from that point, as business owners and camp owners, we will be talking in another episode about succession and the challenges of being, going through that. But Shari, any thoughts on, on that aspect of, your own experience of authentically trying to get into the business? Does any of that resonate?
It does resonate, and I think I had forgotten actually until you said something about your backpacks, Howie. I think it was my son who said, hey mom, those first year camper gifts that you send out, you need to get those out in the mail still. And they were all sitting here. And so we sat down and put them together, and both of them had great ideas for different posts when we got up to camp. We went through all of our camp clothing at their suggestion and like started to post pictures of clothing sitting around camp, and really engaged our campers, but and families, but also our alumni. You know, we would hang a sweatshirt on the outside of a cabin or on the waterfront looking out, and the alumni went crazy, and we ended up bringing all the clothing back to St. Louis and doing this huge sale, and packaging it all in our living room. And what was so interesting were the number of people. We're pretty far north, and our families come from all across the country, literally coast to coast, a few international, a large portion out of the Midwest. We had a number of people who would call and say, "Can I stop by?" And it was so fun. My son was at camp when two of these families came by, and it was really, he sat down with their little ones and talked extensively, social distancing, of course, about, you know, how much he loved camp. And it's really been fun to watch that. So yes, that, you know, succession is an interesting conversation that we could have, Howie, from that, you know, ourselves into our next generation and what we went through. But I think it was really powerful for our kids to be a part of that part of the, how are we going to get through the summer and what are we doing? And, so for sure.
So thinking about next summer, what are you thinking? Where are you at with that, Shari? Have you made the formal announcement that you're running, and have you already started registration, or what does that look like for you at this point?
So we typically open enrollment for the next season at the end of August. So we opened enrollment just as we normally would and said, we're back. We had done a lot of soul searching and a lot of thinking about how we can improve different areas of camp. So we put out 2 volumes of a newsletter talking about all the exciting things as part of our opening of enrollment that we were implementing. We rebranded our trip adventure program because we're both a multi-specialty traditional camp experience, and we branded into a new name for our adventure programs for our 15 and 17-year-olds. So we unveiled T-Bird Expeditions and have a logo that goes with it, and a number of different other aspects of award systems and certificates. And we have a camp passport, Camp T-Bird passport, that we're going to give every camper starting next summer. So it was really exciting to announce we're opening camp enrollment, and here are all the really fun, you know, new ideas that we are bringing to camp. We actually, one of the things that we did as part of this camp season not being available, because we have these expedition experiences in the older age group, is we froze their camp year. So if you were a 2nd through 7th, 6th grader, it's just camp is normal, but we wanted to value and honor the experience that our kids who were 14 were supposed to go out to the Pacific Northwest, and our 15-year-olds do Western states in Canada. And we didn't want them to miss those experiences. So we said, we're going to freeze the experience. And in the middle of the summer, I scratched my head and looked at Michael and thought, we need a new program because we froze. So now we have to do something for that age group that's kind of in between. So we created a new finishing 7th grade program. So when we announced in August, we typically do an early enrollment for a month and just incentivize with some sort of t-shirt or something. And we actually created a swag box this year versus a singular item. And we're giving away a t-shirt, a winter hat, and a hydro flask style bottle. And that just ended the other day. And I'm so happy that our number of early enrollment was exactly where it was in years past. And our parents keep saying, we're so excited that you're thinking about running in 2021. And we respond with, we're not thinking about it. Right. We're running. If we knew then what we know now, we would have opened camp. And we certainly are going to have a lot to negotiate going forward in dealing with COVID, most likely in our next camp season. But we're back and we intend to open, and there's no question in our mind that will be something that will be attainable going forward.
Awesome.
Shari,
well, good. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're all in that, very optimistic that, we're all moving forward. Shari, my question And I know we've talked about a lot of different things. One of the things we haven't touched on yet, you mentioned early enrollment, with the decision to not operate, can you briefly just give us an overview about how did you incentivize families to roll over their registration? Did you get the responses that, you were looking for in terms of families who asked for refunds? Maybe you can share, because the decision not to run and you making the decision for so many of us meant what would it mean for our full year operation? We've taken in money. How much can we really give back after we've invested so much in the preparation of this summer? Can you just share with us some of the approaches and I guess the responses you got from your camp community on that one?
Sure. Like you, Kelly, we applied for the PPP loan. So that was a saving grace for us, just in terms of having some extra cash coming in and helping us. We made the decision to refund 100%, which was a difficult decision from the perspective that we operate, as most camps do, 12 months a year, and are utilizing our tuition to do whether it's upgrades or to pay our salaries or our travels, all the expenses that are part of that camp year as it starts September 1. So when we made the difficult decision to close, and we said, well, of course we're going to refund, offer the opportunity to refund, but we created a page, a questionnaire that said, letting everybody understand sort of the cyclical nature of the finances of summer camp for us. And we said, we are asking you to make a decision for that works for your family, to either roll over 100% or give us a percentage, to refund 100%, to donate to the operating expenses, or to make a donation to one of the two 501c3 organizations that we work with that help send underserved, underprivileged kids to Thunderbird. And the response from that survey and the questionnaire that we sent out was overwhelming. So many of our families rolled over. People who refunded sent us notes saying, we support you, we're struggling, and we would totally roll over money if we could. And we said, there's no judgment in this. Everybody has to make their own decisions. But thank you for sending us that note. Our 501c3 organizations actually collected some money as well through us that we then forwarded on to them. So it was one of those experiences. We didn't know what to expect. We had no idea. And we were pleased and relieved. And when we did our early assignment, we said to our families that, who either donated or rolled over, we're not asking for any money, obviously. We already have your money. You just need to sign up your kids, and we're sending them this great box of fun. So that was, it was a humbling experience going through that.
Sure.
Is the best way to maybe describe it.
Kelly, did you, in terms of your plan with your families, generally speaking, I know we talked a little bit, you got a really great response, as far as supporting what you guys do. Did you want to just, give our listeners a sense of how your experience with that?
Yeah, I think we were really similar to you, Howie. I know you did a little bit different of an incentive for them, but we gave them the opportunity, similar to Shari, to roll over 100%, to roll over just their deposit, or to have their money refunded back to them. And then from there, that determined their registration phase for, typically we do registration in January. So if they rolled over 100%, they kept their same rates for 2020, and then they're in the first tier. So we do multiple tiers. So there was some incentive in which tier they wanted to get to, or what tier they could make work, I guess, for their family. So they were really generous with us. And I would say we had more than 50% that rolled over at least some of their funds, which helped us. So that, very humbling, very appreciative and gracious, and, understanding of where they were.
Yeah, similar with us, we adopted an approach that we discovered that many Major League Baseball teams did with season ticket holders, where they incentivize them with a percentage that we would put into an account for the amount that they kept with us. So we would give families the incentive of 15% of the money kept with us would be put into their account for future registration. You know, a lot of people have, and in speaking with a lot of camps, they had various versions of that, a lot of them, but, you know, we just did it from the landscape of our market and the fact that the day camp market is very competitive, and we really, you know, wanted to thank families for doing this, you know, and just like you, Shari, you know, we got very vulnerable with our families in terms of generational business and the impact on it. And, you know, I think families, you know, for us, and we ended up having about 70% of our families at day camp, so keep their money with us. And we're just at the beginning of starting the journey to 2021, and like all of us, and you know, you've already started registration, and I'm so happy to hear the progress you're making, you know, for the day camp space, you know, and I've talked to a lot of day camp, private camp owners, you know, it's this issue of, you know, school-age children, the challenge of, you know, how is school going? We just felt as an organization, which normally would launch next year's registration at September, that we're waiting till November, just because we want them to feel settled into school for their, day camp people have, most of their population is under the age of 9 or 10. So we really didn't want to add any extra pressure. And we're giving them a long runway to finalize their decision. You know, like, so much is changing. The guidelines are changing. You know, in the day camp space, we don't even know the options we have for daily busing. So we want to really just take it nice and slow and just let them feel that they don't have to give up too much money at this point. One of the features that we had here that we're really grateful for is that our insurance policy here, the one we have and a certain percentage of camps in Canada have, did have a provision for pandemic. So some of us were able to get an insurance claim, which in many ways our insurance broker, who had a vision for asking our underwriters to include that, you know, we were able to. I can tell you right now, no one's underwriting this anymore, but we, where the PPP in the States, we didn't have that necessarily, although we have a wage subsidy that the government's giving us. The insurance claim that we were able to get has really helped us make for many of us, what would have been a catastrophic situation quite much more manageable.
Listen, Howie, you don't need to give Shari and I another reason to move to Canada right now.
I know.
So amidst the situation in the States, I think you should just keep that little insurance policy to yourself.
Are you hiring?
Hey, Shari, we're really close to the border. We could just sneak on through.
I know how to get through the boundary waters to do that, Kelly. You can join
Oh,
me.
yes. That'd actually be awesome. Will you and I in a canoe? Let's talk after this. Oh, I love it. Well, we're similar to Howie in that we haven't started the registration, like I said, but what we're doing, and that reminds me a little bit of what Shari talked about, of all the improvements they've made, is we did social media throughout the summer showing what our work crew was working on. But I specifically started 2 days ago, kind of unveiling each project that we've done over the summer, trying to say, hey, here's what campers will get to experience in 2021. And then with our last one, kind of talking about what registration will look like and when that starts. So we're similar in that to Howie. So, oh gosh, we could just talk about this forever, couldn't we?
Right. We all need some therapy
Sure
sessions. So
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And a canoe trip to Canada.
And a canoe trip to Canada to see Howie.
Anytime. When we open the border.
Right, exactly. Right. Right. When. I'm just going to stick with when.
Yep. Yes, don't take that personally. That's just
factual.
Yes. It is that time in the show, folks, where we come to ending this wonderful conversation by talking a little bit about things that are inspiring us these days. And Kelly, when we started this podcast, came up with this idea, and it's been just awesome to, close out the show with talking about what's inspiring us these days. So, we end each show off with something that's inspiring us right now. It could be a book, an article, a podcast, a poem, a movie you saw, a documentary, whatever, someone else can use to help them become a better camp professional. And in doing so, just sort of, widens our our viewpoint of being human. So, Shari, you are our guest. What's inspiring you that you'd like to share with our listeners?
So something that's very personally and professionally important to me is eradicating racism and discrimination and inequity. It's something that we have been doing as part of our camp experience for a number of years, in our commitment to bringing underserved and underprivileged children and diversifying our camp experience. And with all that has happened here in the US this summer, it's been a little overwhelming. And so I renewed that commitment and really started self-reflecting about my own, even though I had done implicit bias training, and we do it at camp, to really continue that journey. And I'm reading Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and have really started to kind of keep a list of books and documentaries and movies that I'm watching, and how we can continue to infuse that both in our camp community, because I think we are influencers, and by being influencers in our community, we're raising influencers and teaching young adults how to be influencers. So that is what is inspiring me right now and keeping me going, is in terms of how to be helpful in this difficult time, and excited to share what I've learned and continue to learn with our camp community and the larger community.
Awesome. Kelly, what do you have?
So I am going back to books. Almost every single one of mine is a book. But I listened to Brene Browncast, that was Brene and podcast together. Yeah. Brene Brown's one of her most recent podcasts with Stephen Sonnenschein. And he wrote a book called Stretch. And it's about, stretching what you have and making the best of what you have versus chasing. So this idea of stretching versus chasing. And sometimes it can be in your career, it can be in material things. And are you stretching or chasing? But what I really reflected on in that conversation, it was one of those, working on myself, going for walks solo, because I just was in one of those moments. It made me think a lot about my camp career, and am I in a moment right now of stretching and just doing what I can and what we've normally done, or am I chasing? And I felt like after we made the decision to close camp for the summer, and I talked with Howie about that, I felt like a lot of chasing, like, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I pivot? Should I create this new program? And like, chase. I should be doing something for the kids that are at home and hybrid school, and we have all this space. But then stepping back and saying, okay, there's still a pandemic, Kelly, and like, what can you do? And what should you be doing? So it was really reflective for me about being in a stretch phase versus a chasing phase. And so that book has given me a lot of reflection and thought. So I would recommend it. I really liked it. Or just listen to the podcast so you can understand a little bit more.
Yes to both.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, or both, exactly.
Yeah. For
me, I have a book this time. I read the book, in the summer, I read the book, The Choice by Dr. Edith Eger. It's called The Choice, Embrace the Possible. Dr. Eger is a Holocaust survivor. And although the story is in the backdrop of the Holocaust, it is very much a story of how we bounce back from immense challenges. And while nothing, in many ways, the Holocaust is one of the history's greatest challenges to overcome, the second half of the book, which and it's why I'm recommending it, really allows us to frame things in a way of, we always have a choice. And I thought that in the face of even what we face this summer, that we have the choice to be able to turn this around and come back on the other side. And I know we'll all make, next summer at our camps the most special ever for so many reasons. But I do recommend the book, and she's a great writer and a great story. And that's my inspiration for the week.
I like that, Howie. I'm going to check that out. I have 2 books now from you guys that I have to read. All right. So Shari, how can people get a hold of you and find out more about Camp Thunderbird?
Thanks, Kelly. So our website is camptbird.com. And my email address is sherry@camptbird.com. We winter in St. Louis, so don't look for us up north. It's a little too cold up there, but we're excited to start a social distance video prospect and, connection with directors across the country. So also a member of CODA, past president of the Camp Owners and Directors Association. So we're doing a lot of different things and similar to what you all are doing here about sharing the experience. So I need to do a little shout out to that group because they're a wonderful group to be a part of as well.
I like it. We're all about the shout outs. So Howie, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, Howie@camprobinhood.ca is my email address, and you can check us out at www.camprobinhood.ca, that's where you can find me. Always eager to talk to camp pros about everything we're facing these days. So reach out if you have any questions. I'd love to connect.
All right. And my email is kelly@hiddenpinesranch.com. Don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/COP. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and the other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Shari. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Howie. And thank you for listening, everyone.